Juan Patricio Morlete Ruiz was a remarkable painter of 18th century Mexico who stood out for his extraordinary proficiency and skill. In 2007, we had this incredible opportunity of acquiring 6 paintings by Morlete depicting the ports of France. Now, one would logically ask, what is a Mexican or New Spanish painter doing copying images of the ports of France? The paintings are modeled after those by the French artist Claude-Joseph Vernet, which were widely known through a series of prints. The inscription on one of the paintings clearly states that the paintings were meant as copies. The set at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art was probably once comprised of 15 paintings, just like the Vernet set, but regretfully the whereabouts of many of these canvases is presently unknown. What's so remarkable is that Morlete painted not one, but 2 sets of the Port of France, which is some 30 paintings in all. The other set, which is complete, is in a collection in Malta. These are 2 works from the set in Malta that depict views of Mexico City. We have to understand that these were images that were not included in Vernet's Ports of France. So by doing that, what we are seeing is that Morlete was an artist of great invention and that he's inscribing local views into a larger panorama of European geography.
Between 1753 to 1765, the famous French landscape artist Claude-Joseph Vernet was commissioned to paint a series of 15 scenes of the ports of France as a gift for King Louis XV. The set enjoyed immediate success and was widely disseminated through prints by Charles-Nicolas Cochin and Jacques-Philippe Lebas. Morlete may have obtained the prints through Viceroy Carlos Francisco de Croix, of whom he created this portrait, proudly holding his baton of command. The Viceroy was born in Lille, in northern France, and remained abreast of French courtly fashion. He may have brought with him to Mexico a suite of freshly minted prints that he shared with the artist. Another possible source was Viceroy Antonio Maria de Bucareli y Ursúa, who owned a set of the Ports of France by Morlete. These folios from Bucareli's death inventory of 1779 list a set of the ports among the Viceroy's belongings. The paintings in the collection of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art bear the coat of arms of Charles IV, King of Spain, suggesting that the set was planned as a royal gift. When the 6 paintings were acquired, they were covered with yellowed or discolored varnish and had old restorations that were also discolored. The paintings were analyzed through a variety of scientific techniques. The technical examination helped conservators understand not only their condition and the required treatment, but also the techniques and materials that the artist employed. Here we see the paintings under ultraviolet light. The yellow color is the aged natural resin varnish that is fluorescing. The old restorations, some circled in blue, do not fluoresce, but instead appear dark.
And in this X-radiograph of the Port of Bayonne, we can actually see the canvas that the artist painted on, and then we can see the ground layers, which are underneath the paint. And these are these broad brush strokes in these areas. And that's the way he actually applied the ground. And then on top of that, of course, we see the design in the paint layers. We can see that the design was fairly carefully planned. For example, here is the hull of the ship on its side. Here we see the trees. These were all set in, partially painted, and then the water was painted around the ship, and the sky was painted around the trees, and there are no changes. This entire design follows the engraving quite accurately.
Close examination of the pictures with magnification reveals some very faint drawing lines on the ground. This discovery explained the technique that the artist used to set the general design before he began painting. As a general practice, painters prepare their canvases with ground to make them less absorbent and more uniform. Morlete's port scenes have red-colored grounds containing bright earth pigments, a type of ground that is common in Spanish-American painting. Shown here is a tiny sample of paint from the area of the water at 50 times magnification, which reveals the vibrant red ground beneath the blue. To remove the yellowed varnish without swelling the ground, conservator Bianca May devised a method that was somewhat unusual. She employed an organic solvent mixed into a thick gel. The gel is brushed onto a section of tissue paper, which is then placed on the painting surface and left for a tested period of time. Since the solvent is in a gel form and on a tissue, it has less tendency to travel through the cracks of the paint layers to the sensitive red ground below. Once the varnish is dissolved, the tissues are peeled back with the yellowed varnish. Any remaining gel residue on the painting surface is then carefully removed with cotton swabs. Old, discolored retouches that are beneath the varnish layer are also removed in the cleaning process. The old yellowed varnish layer obscured the contrast and tonality of the original colors and flattened the perspective. Once removed, the illusion of space and depth are returned. Here, the conservator fills the paint losses with gesso, which is composed of chalk and animal glue, and levels the fill to match the surrounding paint. The conservator tones the fills with water-based paint to approximate the surrounding original color. Thin layers of varnish are subsequently applied with a spray gun to even the surface, and the conservator continues restoring the losses with resin colors. All conservation materials must be reversible and should have good aging properties so that they hold up over time. Conservators used additional non-destructive examination techniques to determine the pigments that Morlete employed. X-ray fluorescence and ultraviolet visible spectroscopy helped identify various colored earth pigments: lead white, chalk, carbon black, and vermilion. Technical examination also revealed the extensive use of the deep blue color of indigo. Indigo is a dye from a plant that was abundant in the American tropics and therefore commonly employed. The pigment was also exported to Europe, along with the famous red dye it derived from the cochineal insect, which lives on cacti and was harvested in great quantities in Spanish America. For his port paintings, Morlete appears to have mostly used colors that were locally available. How he transferred the smaller designs of the engravings to the larger canvas is still unclear. Perhaps he used a grid to transfer the designs square by square. Although no grids were found on the paintings, they could have been rendered in chalk or another fugitive material that would be very difficult to detect. Equally uncertain is how Morlete arrived at his color selection from the black and white prints, especially since the overall tonality and palette of his paintings differ noticeably from those of Vernet. Did he have a manual with instructions? Or, more likely, did he take liberty in selecting his colors? Despite these lingering questions, the technical examination of the paintings reveals that Morlete was a well-trained and highly skilled artist. He was given the task of copying a set of black and white prints, and in the process demonstrated his artistic mastery by choosing the colors and endowing the compositions with a sense of atmosphere and depth. The privilege of working so intimately with Morlete's painting has allowed specialists to discover much about the painter's technique and materials. In the process, we have gained a clearer sense of how copying images became part of a long tradition that engaged the best painters of New Spain, challenging them to negotiate between the task of copying and invention.